We have created this mini-series of podcasts as part of a role emerging placement with a stroke of luck. If you wish to find out more about this charity's amazing work, please visit their website on www.astrokeofluck.co.uk. Here you will see lots of information on how to support your well-being following a stroke, find out about the professionals involved, and how to get involved yourself. There is also a donation facility in which you can donate anything, big or small, to help the charity carry on with its amazing work. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the first podcast of 3 in a mini-series, all about returning to work. I'm Sophie.
And I'm Suzanne.
You may recognise our voices from a Stroke of Luck's live session. If you don't, you can check it out on a Stroke of Luck's Instagram page, so you can put faces to the voices. How nervous were we doing the Instagram live?
We were so nervous. But here we are now, producing our very own podcast.
A little bit about us both. We are both third year occupational therapy students at Bradford University. If you haven't experienced occupational therapy before,
we support people do the things that they want to do, the things that they need to do in their everyday lives.
We can provide adaptations and equipment to your environment, or we can point you to relevant and important information. Or we can simply be someone to talk to and offer support and advice.
So being students, we've been able to achieve elements of this whilst on placement in various settings throughout our degree programme.
Yeah, and being slightly more mature students, maybe a little bit more mature than we'd care to admit. But with being a little bit more mature, we have experience of working in different settings and with all sorts of different characters that you might meet yourself in the workplace.
We've both worked for a variety of employers, ranging from small independent businesses to large corporate organisations, starting in retail to working within large office environments. The aim of today's podcast is to provide you with advice and recommendations when considering where you are within your recovery and whether it is the right time to be returning to work.
Romy Curtis will also feature on this podcast. We had the absolute pleasure of talking to Romy and discussed her preparation and return to work 6 months post-stroke. And Romy has provided some valuable insight and experience which you will hear throughout.
Today's session won't be quite so taxing, so if you're in your amber or your red zone, keep listening.
However, this podcast requires an element of concentration, so please feel free to pause and return whenever you can do so.
Please note that our discussion will be applicable to UK legislation and touch on UK organisations and their policies.
So, if you are listening from us or the Grand USA, the best thing you can do is look at your local guidance. So how do you know if this podcast is for you?
So you've probably already had some occupational therapy input already, either in a hospital or within the community.
Yeah, in the community they may have already been out to assess your home environment, maybe given you some equipment to aid your recovery in the beginning, and they may have given you some advice on how to break your daily activities into smaller, manageable chunks. So you'll know if this podcast is for you if you've already had that input, you've overcome certain goals in your home environment, and you're now starting to realise this is your new situation. So it's all about reaching that self-acceptance stage and recognising the signs and symptoms you'll need to manage going forward to overcome that plateau. So here we are now with Romy Curtis, who has returned to work after her experience. Do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey?
Hi, I'm Romy and I'm 35 years old and I'm about a year and 3 months post-stroke. So it's still quite early days, in terms of recovery. And obviously it was quite a big shock for me initially, a stroke. It was at Christmas, which was obviously a big shock as well. And I've got a young daughter, so it was quite a challenging time. The last year has been very much focused on recovery, finding my feet with this experience, and my biggest challenge facing returning back to work.
And at what point did you realise you were in that self-acceptance stage of your recovery?
Now, I'd say acceptance is probably the biggest part of the recovery journey. It's above everything, I think. It's a tricky subject, and I think it's very closely associated with denial. I'm sure I speak on behalf of any stroke survivor that at this stage it's very personal to the individual, and it does take time. We're all in denial when the stroke happens. I thought it would be just like having flu. In a couple of days, I'll be okay again. When you continue to feel restricted and able to hardly walk in some cases, it becomes a bit of a stalemate. The first look of acceptance on the horizon is not necessarily obvious at first, but clearer when the things you do in life, whether it's work or personal life, become more manageable, and when you can recognise that fatigue and how it plays a part and how you've got to manage it, and then you're mostly in your green zone. Understanding your limitations are the key to the acceptance and respecting your new boundaries. Before the acceptance period, I used to refer myself to the old or the new versions, like I was two different people. I wasn't very friendly towards the new me, and I used to keep hoping I'd wake up tomorrow and be back to normal. The next phase is probably frustration, anger, emotional breakdowns. I used to always end up in the red zone because I ignored my body's wants and needs. Basically, I was a bit pig-headed. I overworked myself, continued to go against advice, thinking I knew best and what was good for me. I was fighting it constantly with myself most days and ending up flat, KO'd, unable to function as a result. As time went on, I realised that by pushing against the grain continuously, I was hindering my recovery in every way, and everyone around me was also suffering because of this. Once I accepted I had limitations and respected my fatigue, things started to work out better. I became really organised, I planned my week, I structured my working days and my personal day hand in hand, as overdoing it in either area can have consequences. I also reflected that it's actually a great opportunity to reset and start over. All the bad habits and mistakes that I once previously made, they were all deleted, and here's your new start. It's like a cheesy New Year's resolution that you never stick to, except you have to and you've got no choice. I got to know the new me. Acceptance didn't happen overnight for me. It was well into a year post-stroke.
It's just that self-discovery again, isn't it? And
I mean, it was literally like meeting a new person. And it's the weirdest thing because you always refer back to the old me for some reason. And like I said, I felt like I was two different people for a while.
And that must have been hard to accept. Being two different people.
I kept saying, I will get back to this old version of me. I will be that person again. But actually, I don't actually want to be that old version again. Because that old version was, like I say, burning the candle all the time. Running here, there and everywhere. Pleasing everybody. And actually not pleasing myself.
Which is not what you want. You want to embrace who you are and
look after yourself.
One of the main symptoms you have told us about, it's really impacting on your everyday, is fatigue. And by this stage, you will have started to notice your triggers, and you may feel very frustrated by the fatigue And it's because it's impacting on the things that you want to do, the things that you need to do, and it may be impacting on your relationships at home.
Of course, because fatigue can be physical fatigue, in which your body may feel physically tired and drained, or it can be mental, neurological fatigue, in that you can't concentrate anymore or listen to the people around you. You may become more impatient, which can impact on your relationships at home, like Suzanne has mentioned, either with a partner or if you have children. So with experiencing fatigue, you may have already had a look online or spoken to a health professional about how to manage your symptoms. You may have come across the red, amber and green theory we use at A Stroke of Luck, which we know many people will find really helpful when trying to explain fatigue to other family members, and just being more self-aware. With this theory, it is all about knowing what activities put you in your amber and red zone, and what activities require the most energy. And also, what activities can you manage when you're in those different zones? What can you manage when you're in that red zone? Remember, this will be different for everybody.
Yeah. So when you start to recognise what is your red, amber and green zone, you can start plotting the peaks and troughs in your day so that you're not going to exhaust yourself and tire yourself out.
How does your red zone compare to your green zone? So what activities are you able to do whilst in your red zone?
So I think it's quite an extreme contrast from being in the green zone to entering the red zone. When I'm in the green zone, I feel I'm pretty much able to conduct my life as I did pre-stroke, albeit some minor cognitive impairments together with some sensory disablement on my left side. I'm able to carry out some pre-chosen housework duties. I plan this as part of my weekly fatigue management diary, and I'm also able to do family activities. They're always possible when I'm in my green zone. I always best describe myself in the red zone as a wilted flower, very limp, quite unresponsive. There's no going back to the green zone when I'm at that point, and I'd have to have a nap to reflower again. I become very irritable, I lose patience quite quickly, and I become very emotional. Being in my red zone prevents me from carrying out pretty much everything. It stops me in my tracks, basically. Most activities involve sitting down position or laying down. So, for example, cuddling my daughter or her quietly reading a school book to me.
Yeah. So do you recognise those points before thinking about returning back to work?
Yes. I'd very much have to implement where I feel in my green zone and where I'm in my red zone, and apply that to what my job role activities involve.
Yeah.
So for a very good example is, obviously now we're all working at home pretty much. My job used to be very much office based in London, but where we're working from home now, most of our meetings are conducted via Teams.
Yeah.
And it can be very exhausting to go on a Teams meeting after a Teams meeting after a Teams meeting.
Yeah.
So I have to sporadically spread those out through the whole week.
Yeah, it's a little bit like in exercise, how we want to increase our stamina. So we alter the pace of our activities to achieve more in the long run.
One thing you could do is start a diary. If you're considering going back to work, look at your daily routine. Is there anything that you have noticed within your new situation that sets off that fatigue? Is it being in a new environment? Is it being in a noisy environment? Is it talking to lots of people throughout the day?
Yeah, getting all those little details down in a diary could really help you envision what a day at work might be like for you.
When you're feeling fatigued, what are your triggers?
So fatigue comes on very suddenly.
Mm-hmm.
So the triggers are like feeling very heavy in the head.
Yeah.
You get like a fog-like glaze in your head, like that kind of makes your eyes as well, your vision slightly blurred. Nothing dangerous, but it is, you kind of can't focus very well. I definitely slur and mix up my words and tend to stutter.
Yeah.
And I'm not great at getting my sentence right. So it's always quite humorous in we've got a manager's team at work and a meeting, and everyone's very lovely, they all know what's happened, and it's quite jokey in a sense that Romy can't talk today.
Yeah.
So, or I say something ridiculous and everyone just sort of like not laughs, they don't take the mick or anything, but it's kind of support.
Yeah.
And we make light humour about it, and it's like, oh, Romy's having one of her days,
Yeah.
And it's quite nice, really, to have that support, but we make kind of light humour of it, so not to make me, because at first you can feel very embarrassed.
Yeah, of course.
And shy away from wanting to speak to people when you're feeling fatigued.
Yes.
But actually having that support of a lovely team around you, kind of, helping you, it's very comforting.
Yeah.
And at that point, you just have to be honest with yourself and just be like, because you can't retain much information after that.
No.
You can see people, but not necessarily hear them.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of just have to sit, instead of, it does feel overwhelming sometimes, but that's when your limitations come into play, and you kind of know that, right, I need to stop now.
Yeah.
And perhaps walk away from what you're doing.
Yeah.
Having that self-awareness is really the first step to being able to manage your situation and help your plan to return to work.
And with that self-awareness, you are probably aware that you're sleeping a lot more. And having good quality sleep will also help manage this fatigue. From the onset of your stroke, your brain has been working much harder to heal itself and requires this additional sleep.
Yeah, so pre-stroke, you may have managed your day-to-day activities on something like 6 hours sleep. I know sometimes when we are busy and stressed, it can be even less than that. But you need to be more mindful now that the less time you give yourself to sleep and rest, the more fatigue you may experience throughout the next day. Other than fatigue, do you know the impact of your stroke?
So while you were in hospital or within the community, you may have been through quite a few assessments, and you may not have recognised how that might impact on your return to work. But if you've had any cognitive assessments, it might be useful to find out what those results were. They probably were within your discharge documentation, but it's just to recognise if there are any factors which may impact upon your concentration or your memory, or whether you can manage to carry out multiple tasks at once. And it's just being mindful of that now and thinking about that in relation to the role that you are considering to return to. How important is it to recognise the cognitive impact of your stroke before planning to return to work?
So I think it's very essential to recognise your limitations physically when we're returning to work. You have to work out which body parts you use for your job role versus your impaired body parts. I discussed with my OT, and we performed a risk assessment to establish if there would be any need or special equipment, like, because I work with computers, if there was any special computer equipment that I needed, or we reviewed my desk setup, whether it was at the right level, did I have the correct chair for maximum comfort. I have a slight impairment to my left side, and for my job I use a computer and have to type daily. My left hand is a lot slower than my right hand, and it doesn't respond the same as like my right hand would. So I had to take this into consideration and inform my employer of this. You also need to consider your commute to and from your workplace, and formalise this into your kind of return to work package with your employer, because for me personally, my commute is into London. It involves busy trains, lots of walking, and on the other end as well. And for me, that was just a bit of too much of a bigger challenge to consider in my first year. So if you do have to commute, I would say you build that into your daily kind of fatigue management plan. I established that my cognitive impairments, that I use for my everyday job would also need to be worked around. But I worked very closely with my employer, and we established what I wouldn't be able to do and what I would be able to do and work around it. So we quickly established that long meetings were very much a no-no. And like I said before, I wouldn't be able to take any minutes. And I'd, be, where possible, be pre-advised of meeting agendas so that I could prepare beforehand. A lot of this return to work involves pre-preparation for your day. Slight amendments were made to accommodate my cognitive abilities as well.
It's that multitasking element, isn't it, that it's just
it just doesn't happen. You have to just focus on one task at a time, and us, we're women, aren't we? We multitask with everything, and that's been quite a big adjustment for me, is I have to just focus on one. You have to be quite disciplined as well to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Having a greater understanding of this will provide you with a greater awareness of the invisible impact that your stroke has had.
One FAQ that we get quite often as occupational therapists is, by law, what does our employer have to do to help me return to work?
Yeah, it's really fortunate that we've got the Equality Act. This act protects a lot of people with certain characteristics, and whether you recognise this within yourself or anybody else. And it's really fortunate that we've got it, because it means that there's something to protect us, and it will protect you after having your stroke and within your recovery.
Even if you don't really want to identify as someone who comes under those certain characteristics. So sometimes the word disabled can be quite a negative term for some people, or for others it can be really empowering. The only thing is that coming under those certain characteristics will help you achieve what you need to at work and get the support that you need to return to work safely.
Yeah, and it's all about empowering yourself and having the knowledge that it's there to help you. And because of the Act, your employers will have to do things to promote your wellness at work.
Yeah, and there's absolutely no shame in that. It's all about managing your own destiny and taking control of that journey back to work.
Because within that, you can create your reasonable adjustments. You can ask your employer to recognise that this has happened, therefore things may take you longer.
Getting more time to complete tasks, or changing the time that you start and finish to avoid rush hour travel, which for some people might be a certain trigger for fatigue. It's also about looking at your daily tasks and breaking them down into smaller goals that progressively get a little bit more challenging. This way, you're still reaching the goals you need to, but doing it in a safe, sustainable way.
Yeah, and another consideration might be that you join a trade union. You may already be part of one, but if not, a union will also be there to protect your rights as an employee, and they will help you if you need to communicate any needs with your employer if you're not within work currently.
And anyone has the right to join a trade union wherever they work. So yeah, joining a trade union might be your next best call. There are also other people you can turn to access advice and support. You've probably already heard of them if you are listening to this podcast. They are called the Stroke Association, and they've got a fantastic booklet on everything. There is a section about returning to work and information you need if you want to change direction, which includes maybe volunteering or retraining. And it includes all your rights and the regulations about returning to work too. A Stroke of Luck also has many resources available for you, centred on returning to work and improving your well-being through exercise. The government can also provide an Access to Work grant, which can help pay for practical support, which will help you either to start work or to move into self-employment or even start a business. And they're called Access to Work.
So we have discussed some of your rights when returning to work, but to support yourself further, you can access more information via ACAS. ACAS is an organisation that helps employees recognise their rights. They have a specialist section on their website, which can support you with advice regarding employment law and HR processes, specifically if you have any concerns regarding an absence from work, the return to work process, and support for any conflicts of interest regarding your employer.
So there's lots of people to turn to. We've got A Stroke of Luck, Access to Work, the Stroke Association, the Equality Act, the government, trade unions and ACAS. So you're not alone. Another thing we want to touch on in this podcast is your emotional well-being. We just want you to be mindful of what you've already achieved. You're motivated, you've taken control and are looking at such a big goal in your rehabilitation. To get there, there will be some challenges, but we know you will find ways to adapt.
So one of the best quotes we've heard is, "Don't compare yourself with your pre-stroke self, press reset and embrace the new you and take everything from your life that you can." So what is the main piece of advice to give to someone thinking about returning to work whilst coming to accept the stroke?
So again, it's so personal to every individual. Everybody's circumstances are so, different. But I think it's really important to be kind to yourself first and foremost. Do not set yourself with the expectations or even be naive to think that you can just turn up to work and return as you were. Doing exactly what you was doing. The beginning is definitely temporary. Your achievements will become milestones, but you have to respect that it will take time and you have to trust the process. Follow a structured plan and stick to it. It may seem very frustrating, but it's there for a reason. If you help, it will help you and your employer to figure out your pace. I remember doing 3 hours a week when I first returned, and that was simply opening up an email and spending 3 hours a week trying to reply back to one email.
Yeah.
I built this up through a structured plan.
Yeah.
Again, plenty of communication along the way. You must respect fatigue. It can come on suddenly and unexpectedly. Rest when your body says rest and try to plan your week ahead so you know what to expect. There's no surprises. It's a brilliant way to try and avoid going into your red zone if you manage your activities and spread them equally across the week. If you plan to do everything on a Monday, then the likelihood you will feel the fallout for the rest of the week. Don't be afraid to move things around to suit you, and remember, having a bad day is okay and let it pass through and start again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So now that you've recognised whether you're in a place of self-acceptance and you've considered your mental well-being and fatigue management, and you've heard about the various organisations that can help support you, you've also got to think about the people that can support you socially. Think about recruiting your A-team, whether that is healthcare professionals or family members or friends. Just make sure you have a strong network around you that you can turn to, even if it's just to talk, or for them to maybe give you feedback on where they think you are within your recovery journey
And how they can support you.
and whether they think you're ready for the next steps. If there are professionals involved, you may want to go through all the goals you've achieved so far.
And I think that's really important to do so anyway.
How valuable has it been to have a support network around you? So in work or just as your A-team
At home.
I think the initial imagery around having an A-team has been absolutely life-changing to my recovery. It's such a brilliant way of analysing the support system around you. It's been the key to my recovery. It's made up of quite a few different people in different areas. I've made wonderful friendships from fellow stroke survivors.
Yeah.
And they're the people that understand your everyday worries, your everyday experiences, and it's a safe platform to offload, who understand what you're going through. Sometimes this journey can be very lonely, and the aspect of people around you not understanding what's going on is, also when your nearest and dearest don't understand, it can be very frustrating. Obviously, it's not their fault, and they are as frustrated as you are because they can't understand or relate to what you're going through.
Yeah.
Finding the Stroke of Luck charity, it's given me a sense of belonging and support where a family unit is created, makes you feel a part of the same kinds of people experiencing the same things that you go through. The next key members of my A-team were my partner and my daughter. My daughter Neve, who has been basically my reasons to push through and never give up.
Yeah.
Being a single parent at the beginning of this journey, she was 4.
Yeah.
You can't roll over in bed. She's dependent on, dependent on me. So you have to push through. And I think she was definitely my drive with the recovery that I've had. My parents as well, they're both on hand for emotional support through the times when I have bad days or it seems too much. But I think another key person has been my boss.
Yeah.
Supporting my needs, guiding me along the way. We've built a very strong relationship through strong communication, but from both sides. I think that's the key to the return to work is, be open and honest with your manager, with the HR, because they can't understand what you're going through unless you are verbal with them. With me, I'm, very fortunate that I haven't got a physical appearance of a, impairment. So I'd be classed as what you call invisible impairment.
Yeah.
So the only way that my boss is going to understand what I'm going through every day or at a challenging time is by me telling her, this is what I'm experiencing, and you have to help. Others can only help you if you help by them for them to understand as much as possible. It's a two-way thing, and you kind of expect people to just get it. And that's what the frustration in the early days is like, is you should just get it, but they're not going to. So you have to support the A-team by giving them the knowledge and the information for them to be able to help you in return.
So they have to accept it as well as yourself in some respects.
Exactly. They have to kind of understand what the new kind of aspects of you are.
Yeah, definitely. It's been really valuable to listen to.
Yeah, thank you for speaking with us today.
Oh, do you know what? I'm so grateful to have this opportunity for you guys to involve me as well. Like, it's very close. It's like I said, it's so close to my heart.
Yeah.
I'm very passionate about it, so I want to help people as well. So thank you for involving me.
If you've listened to us and feel empowered and ready to return to work, tune into the next podcast where we will guide you through a self-evaluation tool. We will embrace the new, amazing you, and press that reset button.
So in preparation for the next podcast, check out the resources we've created for you online and think about the different aspects of your job role.
Thank you for listening. I've been Sophie.
And I've been Suzanne. Thank you for listening. This podcast has been made in conjunction with A Stroke of Luck. Please visit their website at www.astrokeofluck.co.uk, where you can find many resources to support your recovery. To support the creation of further resources, please make a donation on the website.
Thank you for listening.